Under
Ryan,
the Kitchen with Bill O'Reilly.
Was it not a, I mean, tell me, was this not a shocker when that broke at 7 o'clock this morning?
I mean, absolutely stunning. I mean, I don't think anybody saw that coming.
No.
I mean, I woke up and read it on my phone. I think, I know people in my news organization were scrambling when they learned the news. Brian Stelter, who's our media reporter, has some reporting this morning that apparently the New York Times has been working on an investigation into Lauer for some time. In fact, their investigation goes back to before the Harvey Weinstein story broke. So I guess this is something that's been cooking, but, there were these reports of Lauer having some interactions with women that were inappropriate, but what appeared to be consensual a couple of years ago. But nobody that I knew of had ever accused him of anything that was inappropriate. Obviously, this was something that NBC did not want to mess around with. And, if you go back to the statement that Savannah Guthrie had this morning, there is one isolated incident, but they were led to believe that there were more issues there.
Yeah.
And they had to have a lot, right? There had to have been something
to make it, this
for them
is
to make this bold of a move that quickly. Yeah?
You don't have to be working at CNN. You can be working anywhere in America to see this thing move. So Monday the allegation comes in. By Tuesday they fired him. I mean, that was fast. So
yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a combination of things here. Obviously, they must have had some serious details and some serious evidence to back up this claim. But secondly, it just shows how the culture has shifted. And it's shifted in a matter of months. There was a sense that, if you were a woman and you had an accusation against a powerful man, you had nowhere to go and nowhere to turn.
Yep.
And obviously, with just in a couple of months, that paradigm has shifted in a big way. And it makes you wonder who's next. I don't think that this is the end of this. And I don't think it's the end of it in media, in entertainment, in politics. I think we're going to hear more stories about this, not less.
How about, though, what I find so interesting is why is it that that Bill Cosby has so many people supporting him? Why is it that the president was, despite allegations, and this is not about pedophilia like Roy Moore, but this is inappropriateness with females, and some of which he tweeted out. He got away with it. You have Roy Moore, whose numbers are back. He's back up now in Alabama. And yet you take Kevin Spacey, gone. Matt Lauer, gone. Al Franken still hanging on. Conyers still hanging on. This is just crazy. What makes one inexcusable and the other, well, we don't believe this story?
Well, the biggest reason is that when it comes to politicians, politicians only work for the voters.
Right.
And the voters only have the say as to whether or not somebody's hired or fired when there's another election.
Right.
So Donald Trump won an election, and this is something that his supporters repeatedly say. He won an election despite the fact that these accusations were out there, and there was evidence. There was him on a tape talking about it, even though he's supposedly now telling people that he thinks the tape was doctored.
Yeah.
And, John Conyers, he's not going to face voters again until the fall. Same thing with Al Franken. Much different than Kevin Spacey, who has a deal with Netflix, and Netflix right now is in a position where they feel that the heat is too much, and so they there's one or two people that can make that call. So, when you're a politician, you have the ability to try and spin these accusations against you to your constituents and your supporters, but you have to wonder if the American public is starting to wane on this, and they're going to give somebody less of a benefit of the doubt than they would have prior to that. I mean, I think the day of reckoning for politicians is going to come sooner rather than later. I wonder how long somebody like Al Franken or John Conyers can hang on, given what's going on here. And as for the president, this is definitely going to be something that's going to continue to dog his administration up until he appears before voters again in 2020.
But you're right. I mean, listen, people voted for this president knowing full well what the accusations were. And I don't know where the people in Alabama seem to be like, this isn't true. At least half of them believe this stuff is not true. Roy Moore is a God-fearing man who believes in the Ten Commandments. He didn't do any of this. I don't think there was anybody that voted for President Trump that said, I don't believe that he said these things. I don't believe that, he was inappropriate. I'm okay with the fact that he was inappropriate. I'm okay with it. I voted for him anyway, right? That's really what happened.
I mean, there's two different things here. So there's the things he said on the tape, which even today he pushes off as being, that's just a couple of guys talking. You know, that's just locker room talk. I'm not really like that. But there are very specific allegations against the president that he has assaulted women, and he continues to call those women liars.
Right.
You know, Sarah Sanders was asked directly about that in a press briefing not too long ago, and they've said repeatedly that their statement is that those women are not telling the truth, that they're all wrong. And there's some reporting that that's part of the reason that the president decided that he was going to support Roy Moore, because Roy Moore has, vigorously defended himself and said that all these accusations are untrue, and that these now 9 women and their accusations, that all those women are liars, and the president sees a lot of himself in Roy Moore, and that's why he decided to support him. So, when you're a politician, part of it is just not necessarily, you're not attempting to vindicate or convict someone. You just have to leave enough of a shred of doubt that somebody who's inclined to support you because of the issues that you support is willing to overlook that. And we see that with both Republicans and Democrats, right? So Nancy Pelosi is ready to run Donald Trump out on a rail, but she calls John Conyers an icon.
It's really funny how she was so contradicting when on the Sunday programs, I believe she was on Meet the Press, talking about how Roy Moore has got to go, Roy Moore has to go, but with Al Franken, he deserves due process. You can't say, and I understand there is a difference. Franken and Conyers are in office, and to remove them from office, due process is important. I don't think due process applies to an election. It's all about how people feel about you, if they trust you. Allegations are all a part of elections. There's never really any due process when it comes to who does and doesn't get elected.
And then the other aspect that you have to add into it, Bill, is that individuals are willing to forgive certain indiscretions if you believe the same thing that they do about certain issues. I saw many people talk about Roy Moore and say, well, even if he's guilty of essentially pedophilia, the fact that he's going to continue to be pro-life and vote to restrict abortion rights, then he's okay with me. Yeah. That's okay. I'm willing to let that go for this. And on the other side of it, people are with Al Franken will say, well, he's continued to support all these different liberal causes, and if I can continue to have that vote in the Senate, then I'm willing to look the other way on these other things. And I think that's where we've got to come to some sort of a reckoning as Americans to kind of look through the politics of these things and talk about these actual human beings that are in these roles. Are you trying to tell me that it's impossible to find someone that is pro-life, that is also not a pedophilia, a pedophile to represent you? Is it possible to find someone that can vote for liberal causes who's also not, a picture of that person groping a woman's breasts while they're asleep? This idea that we've got to forgive some of these indiscretions in order to get these people on our side to vote on our issues, I think is a fallacy and is laughable. And that's where, I think as voters, we need to take a step back and realize it's about more than just these issues. It's about the character of these people that are representing us.
Let's not forget that Donald Trump was elected because people looked the other way because they hated his opponents so much. And they felt that this was their best shot. And when, there'll be Donald Trump supporters who are going to say, that's not true. I don't believe the stuff about him. No. It took a large amount of people to elect Donald Trump, not just his 30% core. Those other people were people who plugged their nose and said, I'm voting Trump because I ain't ever voting for Hillary Clinton. So that's absolutely true. Where does that 20% of America fit in the midterm elections and in 3 years from now? It's going to be very interesting. Frank is on the line, wants to ask Ryan a question. Frank, you're on with Ryan Nobles from CNN. Go ahead.
Yes, good morning. I just want to say from my standpoint, I've been listening to all these allegations about politicians and people that aren't politicians. And from where I'm sitting, I've been on jury duty, too, a few times. Hearsay. If they did something wrong, they'd be in jail. Where's Anthony Weiner? In jail.
Yeah, Frank, I wouldn't want you on my jury if I'm, because women don't, how do we not get this through our heads? Women...
Reasonable doubt. By the way, I've been on jury, and I've seen where all 12 had it wrong.
All right. Well, I'll let Ryan answer this, all right, to be fair, Frank. All right?
Yeah, I mean,
how do you answer, Frank? Frank, I'm gonna hang up and let you listen off air. Okay. Thank you.
I understand Frank's point, and I can see where he's coming from. But this gets back to this due process issue that you were talking about, the court of public opinion versus the actual court. And I still go back to the fact that literally 3 months ago, it was almost impossible for a young woman who had been harassed by a man with a great deal of power for her to come forward and not to have that ruin her career and potentially ruin her life.
Yeah.
Literally 3 months ago, you could be a 25-year-old woman in a workplace environment with the credentials to be in that environment and be harassed by some man who's in his 50s or 60s that has more power than you. And if you came forward and said something negative about him or accused him of something wrong, it would mean the end of your job and the end of your career. So the idea that these people just haven't been convicted in a court of law because the victims have not been able to come forward or were unwilling to come forward really has nothing to do with the situation. There's a power shift here that's occurred in this country where men like this and even women that could be potentially accused of this are no longer going to be protected by their power. These accusers are going to finally be recognized and be listened to, and they are being listened to for the first time. And that just changes the conversation completely. I mean, if you're someone that was victimized 20 years ago and you've been hiding that, I mean, if you listen to what Leanne Tweeden said, the woman that accused Al Franken of the situation with her, she literally said that every time she saw him on television, her hand involuntarily turned into a fist because she was still so angry about it. Those emotions and those feelings never go away, but she never felt empowered enough to come forward because she thought nobody would believe her.
Yeah.
He was a much bigger and more powerful star. Things have changed. The situation has changed. I believe it's changing for the better, and we can't just pass this off as saying, well, just because these people weren't convicted, then that means it's not true.
Ryan,
I mean, and Bill Cosby's the other perfect example of that.
Ryan,
but he wasn't convicted of it, but,
Here's the problem. You have people saying, well, what took these women so long? And Roy Moore is denying it ever happened. And why didn't they come out earlier? And when those people are actually a person who just so happens to be the president of the United States, we have a moral problem here. And because that's what the president said in defense of Roy Moore. He said, why didn't these women come forward? Why did it take all this time for these? How can the president of the United States say that? But apparently we're okay with that. I guess we as a society are okay with that now.
Ryan, I wanted to get back to the point on Franken. I just wanted to correct you. He likes to hug. This is a misunderstanding. Yeah. So what did you make? What did you make of his comments that I did nothing wrong? This is a misunderstanding. I'm a guy who likes to hug people, but we should believe all these women who come forward. How do you make sense of that?
I mean, he finds himself, I think, in one of the most difficult situations because here's somebody that, in the wake of Weinstein, was one of the first people out there being critical of Weinstein. He just looks like a big hypocrite in a lot of this because he was so critical and claimed that he was such a defender of women and wanted to be on the side of women. So now he's trying to find this middle ground where he can have it both ways, where he can be conciliatory and apologize. But you'll notice every one of his apologies comes with a qualification. I mean, even today or yesterday when he said he still didn't remember the skit where Leanne Tweeden, the rehearsals for that, where she claims that he forced himself on her and stuck his tongue in her mouth. He still says he remembers that differently. So I don't know how it ends with Franken. I mean, the thing about Franken is she is the only one that's come forward with kind of these very serious and direct allegations. And maybe he's able to weather that storm because he's been apologetic and because there doesn't seem to be this kind of watershed of accusations against him. But I don't know how you can reconcile and criticize the President of the United States and then defend Al Franken. It doesn't make any sense. And that's my question. There are a lot of prominent Democrats, Kirsten Gillibrand, New York senator, is one of them, who's been very cautious in her handling of this situation. They're going to have a full ethics investigation about Franken, and theoretically that investigation will reveal or not reveal something about him. And I think we won't know for sure what happens until after that investigation. But yeah, these apologies seem hollow to a certain extent. It's like, I'm sorry because you caught me.
Yeah.
Right,
And
right.
I apologize if you were offended.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it just doesn't make any sense to me. And I just can't imagine, I mean, in this day and age, if you're not a man and you're not looking back at every interaction you've had with a woman and trying to figure out if you've done something wrong and are willing to seriously do something about it, then you're missing the boat here, because this, I mean, I think the world has changed. It's changed in a big way in just the past 3 or 4 months.
Ryan Nobles, we were going to talk about the tax deal and all that. We just ran out of time, but I appreciate it. This just overshadows everything right now. It's crazy.
It sure does. It's definitely the biggest story in America right now. No doubt about it.
No doubt about it. Ryan, thanks. We'll talk next week.
Thanks, guys. Have a great day.